Look inward. Within you is the source of good, ever ready to spring up if you will but dig. These words from Marcus Aurelius cut straight to the heart of what it means to pursue ambition with clarity and purpose. Imagine standing at the edge of your potential, staring down every doubt, every voice that whispers you're not enough, and instead of shrinking back, you lean in. That's the power Stoicism offers, not just a philosophy, but a toolkit for transforming weakness into strength, fear into fuel. What if the very insecurities holding you back could become the foundation of your greatest achievements? That shift in perspective from self-doubt to self-mastery is what we're diving into today. For centuries, Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus faced wars, betrayals, and personal turmoil, yet they emerged with wisdom so potent it still resonates today. Why? Because they understood ambition isn't about chasing external validation. It's about cultivating an unshakable inner resolve. Picture this: two people face the same setback. One crumbles under self-doubt, the other uses it as a stepping stone. The difference isn't talent or luck. It's the Stoic practices that train the mind to reframe obstacles as opportunities. This video isn't just theory, it's a battle plan. We'll explore 40 Stoic techniques to silence the noise of insecurity, sharpen your focus, and channel your ambition with precision. From the premeditation of adversities to the art of negative visualization, these aren't abstract ideas, they're time-tested strategies used by gladiators, emperors, and modern-day leaders alike. Whether you're struggling with imposter syndrome, fear of failure, or the weight of expectations, Stoicism offers a way forward. By the end, you'll have more than just inspiration. You'll have a roadmap to turn your deepest challenges into your defining strengths. So let's begin, not just to learn, but to transform. The first and most powerful tool in the Stoic arsenal is the Dichotomy of Control, a simple yet radical idea that divides everything in life into two categories: what's within your power and what isn't. Epictetus put it bluntly: some things are up to us and some are not. Your opinions, your actions, your desires, those are yours to command. But external events, other people's choices, even outcomes you desperately want, those lie beyond your direct influence. Here's why this matters. Anxiety thrives in the gap between what we want to control and what we actually can. Picture a musician obsessing over audience applause instead of perfecting their craft, or an employee fixated on office gossip rather than the quality of their work. When we pour energy into things outside our control, we drain the focus needed for what truly matters, our own growth. Take modern criticism, for example. Imagine you pour your soul into a project only to face harsh feedback. The Stoic response isn't to dismiss the critique or spiral into self-doubt. It's to ask, can I control the other person's opinion? No, can I control how I interpret and respond to it? Absolutely. This shift transforms criticism from a personal attack into raw material for improvement. The same principle applies to setbacks in health, relationships, or finances, not by ignoring pain, but by redirecting effort toward the one arena where you're undefeated, your choices. So here's a challenge. What's one thing weighing on you right now that's actually outside your control? A delayed flight, a loved one's decision, even society's expectations. Acknowledge it, then consciously release it. Every moment spent wrestling with the uncontrollable is a moment stolen from what you can change. This isn't passivity, it's precision. By focusing only on your sphere of influence, you don't just reduce stress, you amplify your impact. That's the paradox. Surrendering the illusion of control is how you gain real power. Now let's turn to a technique that might seem counterintuitive at first: Premeditatio Malorum, or the Premeditation of Evils. The Stoics didn't just brace for hardship, they actively invited it into their minds long before it arrived. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Think of it like a fire drill for the soul. By repeatedly visualizing worst-case scenarios, losing your job, facing rejection, even confronting mortality, you strip those fears of their emotional sting. It's not about pessimism, it's about vaccination. Just as exposing yourself to a weakened virus builds immunity, exposing yourself to mental adversity builds resilience. Picture this: you wake up to an email saying your position at work is being eliminated. Your chest tightens, your pulse races until you remember you've rehearsed this moment 100 times in your mind. You've already asked yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe you'd tighten your budget, network aggressively, or even pivot to a new career. The shock fades because you've mapped the terrain in advance. That's the power of negative visualization. It transforms the unknown into the familiar. And here's the unexpected bonus: by regularly contemplating loss, you develop a piercing gratitude for what you have. Seneca urged his readers to pause and reflect. You may expect that these things will happen to you, but do not hope that they will not. So let's try it now. Close your eyes just for a moment and imagine your deepest fear materializing. Maybe it's financial ruin, public humiliation, or failing someone you love. Now ask, what would I do next? Not in a panic, but with the calm of someone who's already walked through this scenario. You'd adapt, you'd find solutions. You'd survive. That realization doesn't just soften fear, it reveals your own unshakable capacity to endure. The Stoics didn't practice this to dwell on darkness, but to spotlight their own inner light. When you stare down the worst and realize you're still standing, insecurity loses its grip. Ambition, it thrives in that space. Amor Fati, the love of fate. This isn't just acceptance, it's a wholehearted embrace of every twist, every setback, as if you'd chosen it yourself. Nietzsche, who admired the Stoics, called it my formula for greatness in a human being. Think of it as mental alchemy, taking the lead weight of adversity and transmuting it into gold. Marcus Aurelius lived this daily. As emperor, he faced plague, betrayal, and endless war, yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's Amor Fati in motion, not just enduring hardship, but recognizing it as the forge where resilience is hammered into being. Consider a modern parallel. An athlete suffers a career-ending injury. One response is bitterness, a life defined by what could have been. The Amor Fati response. Reinvention. The injury becomes the catalyst to coach others, study sports medicine, or discover a passion they'd never have explored otherwise. The setback isn't a detour, it's part of the path. This mindset flips the script on adversity. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you ask, "What can this make of me?" Here's where it gets practical. Recall a recent setback, a missed promotion, a failed project, a personal rejection. Now dig deeper. What did it teach you about your limits, your creativity, your priorities? Maybe that rejection freed you to pursue a better opportunity. Maybe that failure revealed a blind spot you can now address. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. When exiled, Seneca turned banishment into a time of prolific writing. When enslaved, Epictetus used his suffering to refine teachings on freedom. Their power came not despite their struggles, but because of them. So try this reframe today. Whatever challenge you're facing, big or small, ask not how to avoid it, but how to love it. Not with resignation, but with the fierce curiosity of someone hunting for hidden gifts. Because when you stop fighting reality and start working with it, you unlock a startling truth: the obstacles are the way. Memento Mori, remember you must die. It sounds stark, even morbid at first glance, but this Stoic practice is anything but pessimistic. It's a wake-up call, a tool to cut through life's noise and sharpen your focus on what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think, not as a threat but as a liberation." Imagine holding this truth lightly in your mind each morning. Today could be my last. How would it change the way you speak to your family, the projects you prioritize, the fears you ignore? Modern life bombards us with distractions, endless scrolling, petty grievances, the chase for approval. But death, the Stoics argued, is the ultimate editor. It strips away the trivial and leaves only the essential. Picture two versions of yourself, one drowning in procrastination, saving dreams for someday, and the other fueled by urgency, acting as if time is precious. Which version would regret less? History's most impactful figures, from Steve Jobs to Seneca, kept mortality close, not to paralyze themselves, but to propel themselves. Jobs famously asked, "If today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do?" When the answer was no too often, he changed course. Here's the challenge: what if you treated the next 24 hours as a gift you can't return? Not with reckless abandon, but with deliberate intention. Would you finally have that difficult conversation, start the project you've been postponing, or simply sit quietly with someone you love, fully present? The Stoics didn't dwell on death to breed fear. They used it to dissolve excuses. As Seneca wrote, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The clock is ticking for all of us, but here's the secret: that's not a curse. It's the pressure that turns coal into diamonds. So pause and ask yourself, what's one thing you'd do today if you knew it was your final opportunity? Not grand gestures, but the quiet, vital acts: apologies withheld, gratitude unspoken, creativity stifled. Then act as if there's no backup plan, because in the end, Memento Mori isn't about death at all. It's about reclaiming your life moment by moment before it slips away. Consider the most powerful weapon in Stoic philosophy, one that costs nothing, requires no special training, yet has shaped emperors and modern thinkers alike: the simple act of writing. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire, never intended his journal to become the timeless classic we know as Meditations. Those pages were raw, private reflections, a man conversing with himself to stay grounded amid absolute power. That's the magic of Stoic journaling. It turns the chaos of the mind into clarity on the page. Start with this question each night: what did I truly control today? Not the weather, not your boss's mood, not the traffic, but your responses, your efforts, your integrity. The act of writing forces honesty. Maybe you catch yourself blaming external factors for your frustration, only to realize the real issue was your own impatience. Or perhaps you note a moment when you chose courage over comfort, like speaking up in a meeting despite fear of judgment. This isn't just record keeping, it's a mirror held up to your growth. Then go deeper. Where did I act against my values? The Stoics weren't interested in self-flagellation, but in course correction. Imagine jotting down, "I snapped at my partner when stressed," followed by, "Tomorrow, I'll pause for 3 breaths before reacting." That's the journal as a troubleshooting tool, spotting patterns before they become habits. Seneca did this rigorously, writing to his friend Lucilius, "I assess my day, reviewing what I did and said, hiding nothing from myself, skipping nothing." But here's the key: make it actionable. Instead of vague entries like "today was hard," drill down: what made it hard? Did I contribute to that difficulty? How might I approach it differently tomorrow? Concrete answers transform reflection into progress. Think of it as sharpening your mental axes daily, so when life storms hit, you're prepared. Try this tonight. Grab any notebook or digital note. Write for 5 minutes without filtering, no polish, no audience. Ask those 2 Stoic questions, then add a third. What's one small victory, however minor, that aligned with my purpose? Maybe you resisted gossip, chose kindness when tired, or simply acknowledged a fear without letting it steer you. That's how journals become launch pads. Aurelius didn't write to impress posterity. He wrote to remind himself of his humanity, his fallibility, his capacity to rise. Your journal, it's where ambition meets accountability, 1 page at a time. There's a reason astronauts return from space forever changed. They've seen Earth from the outside, a fragile blue marble suspended in darkness. The Stoics practiced a version of this shift in perspective centuries before space travel, calling it the view from above. Seneca described it as lifting yourself mentally to gaze down on human affairs from cosmic heights, watching cities shrink to specks and lifetimes blur into fleeting moments. Why? Because when you zoom out far enough, most of what consumes our daily energy, the slights, the comparisons, the trivial stresses, reveals its true size, insignificant. Take social media envy. Scrolling through curated highlight reels, it's easy to feel your life doesn't measure up. But from Seneca's vantage point, those posts are fleeting sparks in the vast dark. The promotion someone flaunted today will be forgotten in months. The vacation photos that stung will fade into digital oblivion. This exercise isn't about dismissing genuine emotions, it's about recalibrating their weight. Ask yourself, how much will this bother me in a year? If the answer is not at all, why let it steal your peace now? The magic lies in the contrast. From ground level, a missed opportunity feels catastrophic. From 10,000 feet, it's one thread in a much larger tapestry. Marcus Aurelius used this technique to navigate the burdens of empire, writing, "Think of the substance of the whole, how small your share of it." He wasn't diminishing his role, he was freeing himself from the paralysis of perfection. Modern applications are everywhere, stressed about a work conflict. Imagine looking back at it from your deathbed. Would it even register? Obsessing over a mistake? Picture Earth's timeline, where even your greatest triumphs will someday be dust. Here's how to practice it today. Close your eyes and visualize rising above your current worry, through the roof, above the clouds, until continents come into view. Watch humanity's bustling ant trails, people fighting for parking spots, refreshing likes, fretting over fashion. Notice how small it all seems from here. Then zoom back in, carrying that perspective with you. The problem hasn't disappeared, but its grip has loosened. That's the Stoic secret. Sometimes the way through stress is to rise above it, literally in your mind's eye. Try this reframe the next time you're caught in a spiral. Will this matter in 5 years? If not, grant it 5 minutes of your attention, not 5 hours. The view from above doesn't erase challenges, it reveals which ones are worth your finite energy. And in that clarity, ambition finds its truest direction. Cato the Younger, one of history's most formidable Stoics, wore threadbare robes in the Roman Senate, walked barefoot through snow, and slept on the hard ground, not because he had to, but because he chose to. This is the essence of voluntary discomfort, deliberately seeking out hardship to inoculate yourself against life's inevitable struggles. The Stoics called it ascesis, a training regimen for the soul. Seneca put it plainly, set aside a certain number of days to content yourself with the scantiest and cheapest fare. Why? Because comfort is a cage. The more you surround yourself with ease, the more fragile you become when life inevitably shakes you. Start small. Take cold showers, not just for the health benefits, but for the mental discipline of standing under that icy water and deciding not to flinch. Skip a meal occasionally, not to punish yourself, but to remind your body who's in charge. Leave your phone at home during a walk. These are modern versions of Cato's austerity. Each one is a micro-battle where you prove to yourself, I can endure more than I think. Naval Ravikant, the philosopher-entrepreneur, practices this by sleeping on the floor once a week. It recalibrates my baseline, he says. Luxury becomes a choice, not a necessity. But here's the deeper truth. Voluntary discomfort isn't about self-denial, it's about freedom. When you willingly face minor hardships, you dismantle the fear of larger ones. Imagine two people losing their jobs. One has never missed a meal or slept in a cold room. The other has trained for adversity. Who panics, who adapts? The Stoics' new fragility isn't fate, it's a lack of preparation. As Epictetus told his students, difficulty shows what men are. So ask yourself, what comfort could you surrender today to forge resilience? Maybe it's turning off notifications for an hour to practice focus, or taking the stairs instead of the elevator to embrace effort. The goal isn't suffering for its own sake. It's proving to yourself that you're more than your cravings for convenience. Because when you willingly step into discomfort, you rewrite your relationship with fear. And that's where unstoppable ambition begins. Epictetus once told a story about a man who dropped and shattered his favorite vase. The man stood frozen in horror, devastated by the loss, until Epictetus offered a radical perspective. Why weep over what you cannot repair? The vase was always destined to break. Today was simply its day. At first glance, this seems callous, but buried in that moment is one of Stoicism's most liberating tools, cognitive reframing. It's not about denying pain, it's about choosing the story you tell yourself about that pain. Every challenge carries two narratives, the one that weakens you and the one that strengthens you. The broken vase isn't just a loss, it's a lesson in impermanence, a reminder to cherish what you hold while you hold it. Take the modern workplace. Imagine spending months on a proposal, only to have it rejected in a 5-minute meeting. The default reaction might be embarrassment or self-doubt, but reframed through a Stoic lens, that rejection becomes data. Maybe it reveals a misalignment with your audience's needs, pushing you to ask better questions next time. Or perhaps it uncovers a deeper passion for a different path altogether. The project didn't fail, it redirected. This is how Thomas Edison famously viewed his thousands of unsuccessful experiments. I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. The key lies in interrogating your assumptions. When faced with a setback, ask, what if this isn't a setback at all? A missed flight becomes unexpected time to read. A financial loss forces creativity with limited resources. Even grief, as brutal as it is, can reveal the depth of your capacity to love. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat hardship, they stripped it of its power to define them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way," not as a platitude but as a battle cry. So here's your challenge. Identify one current struggle, a strained relationship, a professional disappointment, a personal insecurity. Now flip the script. If this weren't a problem but an invitation, what might it be calling you to develop? Patience, courage, a new skill. The vase is already broken. The power lies in what you build from the pieces. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a relentless question in his private journal. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That single line cuts through the noise of modern life like a scalpel. The discipline of action isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Picture two carpenters. One swings his hammer frantically, proud of his calloused hands, while the other measures twice, strikes once, and builds something enduring. Both are busy, but only one is effective. Stoicism draws that same distinction between motion and purpose. Consider how we fill our days responding to emails, attending meetings, scrolling feeds. Now ask how many of those actions align with your deepest values. The Roman emperor put it bluntly, your actions should be like the inscriptions on a coin, clear and unmistakable. For him, that meant ruling with justice amid corruption, writing philosophical reflections between battles, choosing duty over decadence. For you, it might mean turning down projects that pay well but drain your soul, or saying no to social obligations that distract from creative work. Integrity isn't a grand gesture, it's the sum of small, consistent choices. Busyness masquerades as productivity. Ever met someone who brags about their 60-hour work week, yet their actual accomplishments are vague? Contrast that with an artist who spends 3 focused hours daily on their craft, producing masterpieces over time. The Stoics called this prosouch attention to intention. Epictetus warned his students, progress isn't measured by how much you do, but by how much you stop doing. Every unnecessary task you prune creates space for meaningful effort. So here's the litmus test. At day's end, review your actions like a Stoic auditor. Did that 2-hour meeting move your key project forward, or was it political theater? Did scrolling social media sharpen your mind or scatter it? Marcus Aurelius had a nightly ritual. I examined the day's deeds to see where I strayed from reason. Not to self-punish, but to course-correct. Try this today before starting any task. Pause and ask, does this serve my larger purpose? If you're honest, you'll find whole categories of activity that can be abandoned without loss. That's the paradox. Doing less often means achieving more. Because when every action is deliberate, your life becomes a compass pointing true north. Seneca once warned, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we listen twice as much as we speak, a principle that cuts through the noise of our modern world like a scalpel. The Stoics didn't just practice silence, they revered it as a superpower. In an era of endless podcasts, hot takes, and social media shouting matches, the discipline of holding your tongue isn't just polite, it's transformative. Picture a crowded room where everyone's talking and no one's heard. Now imagine the person who listens deeply, responds thoughtfully, and leaves conversations richer rather than just louder. That's the Stoic art of silence in action, not as passive absence but as active wisdom. Gossip was Seneca's prime target. He wrote, the conversation of fools is like the clatter of pots, loud, empty, and impossible to ignore. 2,000 years later, office break rooms and group chats prove little has changed. But here's the Stoic twist. Avoiding gossip isn't about moral superiority. It's about reclaiming your mental real estate. Every minute spent dissecting someone else's choices is a minute stolen from improving your own. Think of attention as currency. Would you invest it in fleeting drama or in ideas that sharpen your ambition? The Roman philosopher saw chatter as a leak in the boat of progress. Plug it, and you sail faster. Modern communication overload amplifies this challenge. Notifications, reply all emails, and the pressure to have an opinion on everything create a constant hum of reactivity. The Stoic antidote, strategic silence. Before speaking, ask Seneca's 3 questions. Is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If one answer is no, let the words dissolve. This isn't about suppressing your voice, it's about ensuring your words carry weight when they do emerge. Consider Abraham Lincoln, who drafted the Gettysburg Address in near total solitude, refining each syllable until his few minutes at the podium echoed for centuries. Brevity paired with depth outlasts noise. Try today's challenge: observe more, react less. In conversations, count to 3 before responding, not to formulate your next point, but to truly absorb what's being said. Notice how often you interrupt or mentally rehearse replies while others speak. The payoff: deeper connections, sharper insights, and a quiet confidence that doesn't need constant validation. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Words are tools. Silence is the workshop where they're forged." Master both, and you master the room without saying a word. Epictetus drew a line in the sand with two words that upend modern society's obsession with status and stuff: preferred indifference. On one side lie things like wealth, reputation, and comfort, advantages it's natural to prefer, but that hold no inherent moral value. On the other, they're opposites: poverty, obscurity, discomfort, conditions we'd rather avoid, yet ones that also don't define our worth. The revolutionary twist: both categories are indifferent to a life well lived, not unimportant but irrelevant to your core character. Picture two travelers. One clings to a golden compass, terrified to lose it. The other navigates by the stars, free to adapt when the compass breaks. That's Stoic indifference, not apathy, but liberation from letting externals dictate your peace. We've been conditioned to chase promotions, likes, and luxury cars as if they're lifelines. But the Stoics ask, what happens when the market crashes, the algorithm changes, or the car gets scratched? If your happiness is tethered to these things, you're hostage to fortune. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, slept on a hard bed and ate simple meals periodically to remind himself, this is enough. Not because money was evil, but because he refused to let it become essential. Modern parallels abound. Ever felt your mood swing based on a text left unanswered or a colleague's offhand comment? That's attachment to indifference in action, handing your inner stability to external whims. Here's where it gets practical. Preferred indifference aren't enemies, they're tools. A raise is nice, but it doesn't make you better. A critic's harsh words sting, but they don't make you worse. The key is to hold these things lightly, like a traveler carrying a map they know might blow away in the wind. Epictetus, born enslaved, embodied this. His master could break his body, but not his will. Centuries later, Viktor Frankl echoed this in Nazi concentration camps, writing, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, his attitude. So test yourself today." What external validation are you overly attached to? The applause after a presentation, the number on a bank statement, the follower count that never feels high enough. Notice how craving these things amplifies anxiety, while indifference to them breeds calm. This isn't about rejecting success, it's about redefining it. Wealth becomes fuel, not identity. Praise becomes data, not oxygen. When you stop needing the world to confirm your worth, you gain something unshakable: the ability to act from integrity, not insecurity. The next time society whispers, "You must have this to matter," ask, "Must I, really?" The answer might just set you free. An inventor's lab burns to the ground, destroying years of work in minutes. Most would crumble, but Thomas Edison watches the flames and says, "All my mistakes are now gone." That's the essence of the obstacle is the way, not a platitude, but a radical reframe that turns barriers into bridges. Ryan Holiday revived this ancient Stoic principle for the modern age, showing how figures from Amelia Earhart to Steve Jobs didn't just overcome challenges, they used them as raw material for reinvention. The pattern's always the same. What looks like a roadblock from one angle becomes a stepping stone from another. Take Edison's infamous 10,000 attempts to invent the light bulb. Journalists called it failure, he called it education. Each no wasn't proof of impossibility. It was a data point narrowing the path to yes. The Stoics saw this centuries earlier. When exiled from Rome, Seneca didn't beg for mercy. He penned letters that became timeless philosophy. When Epictetus was enslaved, he didn't lament his chains. He studied how freedom exists in the mind long before the body follows. Obstacles didn't break them, they revealed them. Here's why this matters today. We've been conditioned to see setbacks as stop signs. A rejected manuscript means, I'm not a real writer. A missed investment opportunity proves I don't have what it takes. But Holiday's interpretation flips the script. That rejection, it's feedback to hone your voice. That financial loss, it's a masterclass in risk assessment. The obstacle isn't the enemy, it's the syllabus. Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted, becoming the most beautiful part of the piece. That's the Stoic approach to adversity. Your flaws, anxiety, inexperience, past failures aren't weaknesses to erase. They're the very seams where your resilience shines brightest. So here's your challenge. Pick one current obstacle, a skill gap, a resource shortage, even a personal insecurity. Now ask, how could this actually serve me? Maybe that intimidating public speaking fear pushes you to prepare more thoroughly than overconfident rivals. Perhaps a tight budget forces innovative solutions that lavish funding would have stifled. The Romans had a saying, per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars. Your obstacles aren't blocking the path, they are the path. Start walking. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings with a simple yet profound question. What virtue will you practice today? Not what tasks will you check off, not what meetings will you endure, but how will you strengthen your character before the world demands your attention? This is the heart of a Stoic morning ritual, carving out sacred space between sleep and society to anchor yourself in purpose. Picture two versions of dawn, one where you're jolted awake by alarms and notifications, already behind before you begin, and another where you rise deliberately, like an athlete lacing up for training. The difference isn't time, it's intention. Start with stillness. Before reaching for your phone, sit in silence for 5 minutes, not to plan or problem solve, but to simply be. The Stoics called this premeditatio, a preview of the day's challenges paired with quiet confidence in your ability to meet them. Close your eyes and visualize obstacles you might face. A difficult conversation, a tempting distraction, a moment demanding patience. Mentally rehearse responding with wisdom rather than reacting with impulse. This isn't about predicting every detail. It's about conditioning your mind to default to clarity under pressure. Next, ink meets paper. Keep a journal by your bed and write 3 sentences, 1 gratitude, 1 intention, and 1 reminder of impermanence. I'm thankful for this breath, this chance to begin again. Today, I'll listen more than I speak. The clock is ticking. What legacy does this hour deserve? These aren't affirmations, they're compass points. Seneca wrote letters to himself each morning, reinforcing truths he feared he'd forget in the day's chaos. Modern neuroscience backs this. Writing by hand activates the brain's reticular activating system, priming you to notice opportunities aligned with your words. Now embrace discomfort. Splash cold water on your face, take a brisk walk without headphones, or skip breakfast once a week. Why? Because voluntary hardship is Stoic armor. It reminds you that warmth, fullness, and ease are gifts, not entitlements, and trains you to function even when conditions aren't perfect. Like a sailor preparing for storms during calm seas, these small acts build resilience you'll draw on when real adversity strikes. Finally, set a single virtue task. Instead of a to-do list cluttered with 50 items, choose one action that embodies your highest self. Maybe it's mentoring a colleague without expecting credit, or creating something meaningful despite fear of judgment. Marcus Aurelius advised, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. So ask yourself tonight, how might tomorrow morning look if it weren't just a prelude to productivity, but a foundation for integrity? The Stoics didn't chase efficiency, they cultivated excellence, and it all began in those quiet hours when the world was still asleep and their character was wide awake. As the sun dips below the horizon and the day's chaos fades, the Stoics didn't just unwind, they engaged in what Seneca called the day's reckoning. Picture this: you're not just scrolling through your phone or collapsing into bed exhausted. Instead, you're holding a mirror up to your actions, not to judge but to refine. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure what I've done and said." That nightly ritual wasn't about self-criticism, it was about course correction. Imagine a ship's captain adjusting their route after each day's sail, not because they failed, but because they're committed to reaching their destination with precision. Start with 3 simple questions, just as the Stoics did. First, where did I act with virtue today? Not perfection, but progress. Maybe you held your tongue when provoked, or chose patience with a frustrating colleague. These moments often slip by unnoticed, yet they're the building blocks of character. Seneca celebrated small wins, writing, "I was angry, but I did not strike. I was wounded, but I did not retaliate." Second, where did I fall short of my ideals? Be specific. Instead of, "I was lazy," pinpoint the moment. "I procrastinated on that important call because I feared rejection." This isn't guilt-tripping, it's gathering data to strategize tomorrow's improvement. Now, the most transformative question: what did today teach me about myself? Perhaps a heated argument revealed a trigger you hadn't acknowledged, or a spontaneous act of kindness showed a strength you'd underestimated. Epictetus taught that life's events are like a gymnast's equipment. Each one exists to train you. That missed deadline, it's a lesson in prioritization. That awkward conversation, a masterclass in emotional intelligence. The key is to extract the insight without dwelling on the discomfort. Here's where journaling becomes actionable. Don't just reflect, plan. If you noticed impulsivity today, write, "Tomorrow, I'll pause for 3 breaths before responding to emails." If you avoided a difficult task, note, "I'll tackle it first thing before distractions pile up." Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his Meditations, turning observations into directives. You don't have to stay frozen in fear. You can rise and act, but the Stoics took it further. They practiced sympatheia, reflecting on their connection to others. Ask, how did my actions affect those around me? Did my stress spill onto my team? Did my encouragement lift someone's day? This shifts reflection from self-improvement to collective impact. Seneca often ended his evenings by considering how he'd served humanity, writing, "What good have I done today? Not for myself, but for the world." Try tonight's ritual. Set aside 10 minutes with a notebook. Review the day like a Stoic archaeologist, sifting through moments not for treasure or trash, but for artifacts of growth. No fluff, no self-flagellation, just honest excavation. Then close with gratitude, not generic "I'm thankful for health" statements, but precise acknowledgements. "I'm grateful for the barista who remembered my order. It made me feel seen." Gratitude, paired with reflection, becomes the bridge between today's lessons and tomorrow's breakthroughs. Because the Stoics knew this truth, nights spent dissecting the day create mornings charged with purpose. When you end in reflection, you don't just sleep, you evolve. Epictetus drops a truth bomb that still echoes 2,000 years later. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Think about that for a second. It's not the rude comment that ruins your day. It's the story you instantly spin about what that comment means. Maybe you assume disrespect, incompetence, or malice. But here's the Stoic twist. Between the stimulus and your reaction, there's a gap, and in that gap lies your power. Picture this: you're scrolling online when someone tears into your latest post. Your pulse spikes, fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to fire back. Now imagine hitting pause just for 3 breaths. In that space, you might realize the critic didn't actually read your full argument, or that their anger says more about their bad day than your worth. This isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about interrogating it. Epictetus trained his students to ask, "Is this within my control?" If someone's rudeness isn't, then your interpretation and your next move absolutely is. Modern life runs on instant reactions. From Twitter feuds to road rage, we're conditioned to meet sparks with gasoline. But the Stoics practiced something radical, the delayed response. Seneca described it as placing time between yourself and the event, like a guard at the gate of your mind. When insulted, Roman philosopher Cato would reportedly pause, then reply, "Do you have anything else to say?" Not because he lacked passion, but because he refused to let others dictate his inner state. Here's where it gets practical. Next time you feel that familiar surge, a condescending email, a snide remark, try this. First, label the emotion. This is frustration. Just naming it creates distance. Second, question the narrative. Did they intend to offend, or am I projecting? Third, choose your battlefield. Not every slight deserves your energy. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. Your challenge today, catch one emotional reaction midstream. Maybe it's irritation at slow traffic or defensiveness during feedback. Freeze frame it. Ask, what story am I telling myself here? Then rewrite it. The driver cutting you off isn't a personal attack. It's someone distracted by their own struggles. The critical coworker might be clumsily offering help. When you master that pause, you don't just control first impressions, you reclaim your peace, and that's a victory no rude comment can undo. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. The Stoics took this wisdom and forged it into a daily practice because they understood something profound. Ambition isn't fueled by grand declarations, but by the quiet, relentless repetition of small choices. Picture two sculptors. One waits for inspiration to strike, chiseling only when the mood feels right. The other shows up daily, whether motivated or not, knowing each stroke, no matter how slight, shapes the masterpiece. That's the Stoic approach to habits, not as occasional acts of discipline, but as the very architecture of character. Consider the difference between virtuous and vicious habits in pursuit of ambition. A morning spent scrolling social media trains your brain for distraction, while 20 minutes of focused reading builds mental endurance. A daily complaint about unfairness reinforces victimhood. 5 minutes of gratitude journaling cultivates resilience. The Stoics didn't see habits as morally neutral. They recognized each one as a vote for the person you're becoming. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought." Modern neuroscience confirms this. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Every time you choose patience over irritation or action over procrastination, you're literally rewiring your brain for excellence. Epictetus took it further, urging his students to practice poverty by periodically living with less, not because deprivation was virtuous, but to break the habit of dependency. He knew luxury could become a crutch, one that weakens ambition by insulating us from discomfort. Contrast that with modern life's endless shortcuts, binge watching instead of creating, outsourcing tasks that build competence, or numbing stress with instant gratification. These aren't just lazy habits, they're thieves of potential. So here's the pivotal question: what's one habit silently steering your ambition, for better or worse? Maybe it's hitting snooze instead of rising to write that book chapter, or reflexively checking emails during deep work sessions, fragmenting your focus. The Stoic solution isn't willpower, it's system design. Seneca structured his days to avoid distraction, writing, "I retreat to my thoughts." You might start smaller, Leave your phone in another room during creative hours, or replace evening doom scrolling with a walk to process the day's lessons. Habits are the invisible currents that carry us toward our goals or away from them. The Stoics didn't leave this to chance. They engineered their routines like blacksmiths tempering steel with heat, repetition, and unwavering intent. Your turn. Pick one habit today, not to overhaul your life, but to bend the trajectory. As Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught, well-being is realized by small steps, but is truly no small thing. Marcus Aurelius began his day with a ritual that might surprise modern readers. He thanked the people who annoyed him, not in a passive-aggressive way, but with genuine appreciation for the friction that polished his character. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, he wrote, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, but they've been given to me as teachers. That's Stoic gratitude at its most potent, not just counting blessings, but mining everything for its transformative potential. Imagine treating life like a masterclass where even the harshest critics become professors, revealing your blind spots. This philosophy flips conventional gratitude on its head. Most of us know to appreciate sunny days and promotions, but what about the colleague who undermines you, or the project that failed spectacularly? The Stoics saw these as hidden gifts. Seneca called adversity the instructor of great men, while Epictetus reminded his students, if someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand your mind to anyone who insults you. Gratitude became their shield against victimhood. Start small with a daily list, not just the obvious wins, but the subtle tutors. Thank the traffic jam for teaching patience. Thank the rushed barista for showing how stress looks from the outside. Thank your past self for mistakes that steered you toward wisdom. Marcus kept a running tally of mentors in meditations, crediting his rhetoric teacher for showing him not to be offended by those who speak harshly, and his adoptive father for modeling calm in all circumstances. These weren't hollow platitudes, they were active recognitions of how even abrasive interactions had sculpted him. Here's the challenge. What's one thing you've been taking for granted, not despite its goodness, but because of it? The electricity that powers your devices without a thought, the friend who always listens, now faded into background noise, the body that carries you daily, noticed only when it aches. Stoic gratitude isn't passive appreciation, it's a constant recalibration of attention. When Aurelius wrote, "Take away your opinion about what bothers you, and you stand firm," he was pointing to this alchemy. The moment you reframe an irritation as instruction, it loses its power to disturb. Try tonight's ritual. Before sleep, name 3 unlikely gifts: the delayed flight that gave you time to read, the critical comment that revealed an area to grow, even the exhaustion reminding you of your limits. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, gratitude isn't about avoiding heat. It's about using it to forge something unbreakable. Because when you stop seeing life's challenges as interruptions and start recognizing them as curriculum, every moment becomes fuel for your ambition. The Stoics didn't just study philosophy, they studied people. Marcus Aurelius filled his private journal with names, not abstract ideas. He wrote of his adoptive father's patience, his teacher's humility, even the cunning of politicians he despised, each a living lesson in virtue or vice. This was no accident. Stoicism recognizes something profound. We grow fastest when we have living proof of what's possible. Cato the Younger wasn't just a historical figure to Seneca, he was a North Star. When tempted by wealth or comfort, Seneca would ask, "What would Cato do?" That question held more power than any textbook. Consider Socrates, a man who drank hemlock rather than betray his principles. To the Stoics, he wasn't just a martyr, he was a blueprint. Epictetus told his students, "If you want to be good, first convince yourself you're bad," echoing Socrates' relentless self-examination. But here's the key: these weren't distant idols placed on pedestals. They were mirrors. When Zeno lost his fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't just rebuild his life, he founded Stoicism itself. The message: role models aren't meant to be worshipped, they're meant to show you your own untapped potential. Modern life offers no shortage of celebrities, but true mentors are rarer. A viral influencer might teach you how to dress, but who shows you how to live? The Stoic approach is twofold. First, study the greats of history, not just their triumphs, but their stumbles. How did Lincoln handle betrayal? How did Marie Curie persist when the world dismissed her? Second, and this is crucial, find living exemplars, not perfect people, but those who embody specific traits you're cultivating. Maybe it's a colleague who stays calm under fire, or a friend who turns setbacks into fuel. Here's your challenge: identify one person, historical or contemporary, who represents the virtue you most need right now. Is it Marcus Aurelius' discipline, Amelia Earhart's daring, or perhaps the quiet resilience of someone in your own life? Then go deeper. What specific, actionable choices made them who they are? Cato didn't wake up fearless, he practiced courage daily, wearing unconventional garb to mock vanity, speaking truth to power even when it cost him. The magic happens when you move beyond admiration to emulation. Don't just think, "They're so strong." Ask, what would strength look like in my context? Your role models are lighthouses, not destinations, but guides lighting the way through your storms. As Seneca wrote, we need to set our eyes on someone who can show us how to live. The right example doesn't just inspire, it activates. So tell me, who's holding up the mirror to your best self today? Seneca's words cut like a scalpel. Life is long if you know how to use it. Yet most of us live as if time is endless, deferring dreams, tolerating distractions, mistaking motion for meaning. His essay on the shortness of life isn't just a meditation on mortality. It's a wake-up call to audit how we spend our most finite resource. Picture two neighbors. One spends evenings binge-watching shows he'll forget by morning. The other learns pottery to finally honor her creative itch. Both have the same 24 hours, but one is rich in time while the other is bankrupt. The difference isn't leisure versus productivity, it's alignment. Are your hours feeding your soul or just numbing your senses? The ancient Stoic identified three thieves of time: procrastination, pleasure-seeking, and preoccupation with others' agendas. Sound familiar? Scrolling through curated highlight reels of strangers' lives, attending meetings that could have been emails, chasing promotions in fields you don't even respect. Seneca called this being busy to avoid living. Modern studies confirm his insight. The average person spends over 4 hours daily on mindless screen time. That's 60 full days a year surrendered to distraction. But here's the twist: the problem isn't leisure itself, it's passivity. The same 4 hours spent gardening, playing guitar, or volunteering could nourish skills and relationships that outlast us. Seneca reserved special scorn for those who postpone life itself, not just delaying a project, but waiting for some mythical, right time to start living intentionally. When I retire, when the kids are grown, when I have more money, these aren't plans, they're illusions. History's most impactful figures, from Marie Curie to Steve Jobs, didn't wait for perfect conditions. They seized imperfect moments. Jobs dropped out of college but audited calligraphy classes, a decision that later shaped Apple's iconic typography. Curie conducted early experiments in a freezing shed. The Stoic lesson: constraints aren't barriers, they're creative catalysts. So let's get brutally practical. grab a notebook and divide a page into two columns: time spent and time invested. Under spent, list activities that drain hours without leaving value: commutes spent fuming in traffic, lunches scrolling mindlessly, weekends lost to recovery naps. Under invested, note moments that compound: reading to a child, practicing a language, even quiet walks to untangle thoughts. The gap between these columns isn't judgment, it's awareness. Seneca wrote, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they're most wasteful." Now the pivotal question: what's one thing you're postponing that would make today feel meaningful if you did it? Not someday goals like writing a novel, but today's version, drafting a paragraph. Not losing 20 pounds, but taking a 20-minute walk. The Stoics didn't just preach urgency, they practiced it. When Seneca's friend Lucilius complained about lacking time, he didn't offer sympathy, he prescribed action. You're not noticing time slipping through your hands. Here's the paradox: recognizing life's brevity doesn't induce panic, it instills focus. Like a traveler packing a single suitcase, you start choosing what truly matters. That meeting can decline, that notification can stay unanswered. That dream, it starts now, not because time is running out, but because you're finally ready to run with it. Epictetus described the mind as a fortress with a gatekeeper, your power to assent or reject thoughts before they take root. Imagine standing at that gate, watching each idea approach like a traveler seeking entry. Some come bearing gifts: truth, reason, clarity. Others arrive cloaked in shadows: self-doubt, exaggeration, fear. The discipline of assent isn't about suppressing thoughts, it's about interrogating them. Is this a guest I want to invite in? That pause, that moment of scrutiny, is where freedom lies. Modern psychology calls this cognitive distancing, the ability to step back and observe your thoughts without fusing with them. Picture this: you make a mistake at work and instantly the thought arrives, I'm incompetent. Without the gatekeeper, that belief storms in, rearranges your mental furniture, and settles in as truth. But with Stoic assent, you halt it at the gate. Is this accurate? One misstep doesn't define my capability. Even experts err. That's not positive thinking, it's precise thinking. Epictetus trained his students to ask, what evidence supports this? Would I judge a friend this harshly? Negative self-talk thrives on automatic assent. I'll never succeed, or they all think I'm a fraud, slip in unchallenged, masquerading as facts. But here's the twist: the more you practice withholding assent, the weaker these intruders become. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his journals, writing, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought." He wasn't just calming himself, he was curating his mental ecosystem. Let's get practical. Identify one persistent negative belief about yourself. Maybe, I'm not disciplined enough, or I don't deserve this opportunity. Now play prosecutor. What's the counter-evidence? Have you ever prepared thoroughly for a presentation? Have colleagues trusted you with responsibilities? This isn't about constructing false confidence, it's about restoring proportionality. The Stoics didn't deny weaknesses, they refused to let them eclipse strength. Try today's gatekeeper drill. Carry a small notebook. Each time a self-limiting thought arises, jot it down and label it. Opinion, not fact. Then scribble a Stoic rebuttal. This is a feeling, not my fate. Over time, you'll catch thoughts earlier until that pause becomes second nature. As Epictetus promised, no one is free who is not master of themselves. Your mind's gate is yours to command. Who gets entry now? Marcus Aurelius faced insults with a simple practice. He thanked his critics silently, not because their words held truth, but because their pettiness revealed his own opportunity to rise. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's Stoic non-reactivity in action, not passive acceptance, but deliberate elevation. Imagine two paths, one where you engage in a shouting match over a careless comment, exhausting your energy, and another where you let the insult hang in the air, unanswered, while you channel that energy into meaningful work. The insult hasn't changed, your relationship to it has. Modern life is full of provocations dressed as opinions, online trolls, backhanded compliments, even well-meaning advice that stings. The Stoic approach isn't about suppressing anger. It's about recognizing that anger, when misdirected, is just another form of slavery. Take the viral nature of social media outrage. Someone posts a snide remark and suddenly dozens pile on, escalating the conflict. But what if you became the exception, the person who refuses to hand over their peace so cheaply? Journalist Anderson Cooper once said, "I rarely respond to critics. It's like wrestling with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig likes it." That's the Stoic stance in a nutshell, not avoidance but selective engagement. Here's the deeper lesson. When you refuse to react, you reclaim authorship of your story. Every petty insult is a test not of your wit but of your priorities. The coworker who takes credit for your idea, the relative who needles you at family gatherings, they're not adversaries, they're mirrors showing you where your ego still clings to external validation. Epictetus drilled this into his students. If someone speaks badly of you, that's their problem. Your problem, ensuring they speak the truth. So here's the challenge. Can you let the next petty provocation pass like a cloud, noticed but unclaimed? Not with bottled-up resentment, but with the quiet confidence of someone who's playing a longer game. Because the Stoics knew something timeless. The higher you rise, the smaller the insults appear. And the less you react, the more you grow. Seneca once wrote to his friend Lucilius about a peculiar form of suffering, the agony of waiting for fruit to ripen. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished, he observed, contrasting the slow unfurling of seasons with humanity's restless itch for immediacy. 2,000 years later, his words cut deeper than ever. We live in an age where meals arrive in minutes, videos load in seconds, and entire careers are judged by quarterly metrics. But the Stoics understood something we've forgotten. Patience isn't just about waiting, it's about trusting the process. Imagine two gardeners. One digs up seeds daily to check progress, ensuring nothing grows. The other tends the soil faithfully, knowing darkness is where roots strengthen. Both want the harvest, but only one grasps the virtue hidden in delay. Consider how modern ambition often backfires. The entrepreneur pivoting strategies weekly, desperate for viral growth, while the competitor committing to a 5-year plan quietly dominates. The writer chasing trends versus the one refining a single manuscript until it gleams. Seneca called this the poverty of haste, the ironic truth that rushing toward success often ensures you miss it. His letters on patience reveal a counterintuitive secret. Delay isn't denial. When exiled to Corsica, he didn't rage against the slow passage of time. He used it to deepen his philosophy, later producing works that outlived the emperor who banished him. The obstacle became the incubation period, yet Stoic patience isn't passive waiting, it's active preparation. Think of Michelangelo chiseling David from a discarded block of marble. For months, he studied the stone's flaws, adjusting his vision to work with its constraints rather than forcing his will upon it. That's the Stoic approach to long-term goals, marrying relentless effort with strategic surrender. Marcus Aurelius meditated on this daily, writing, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." Every morning, he renewed his commitment to incremental progress, knowing Rome wasn't built in a day, but brick by brick. Here's where modern life tests us most. Algorithms reward snap reactions. Social media glorifies overnight success, but beneath every sudden breakthrough lies invisible groundwork. Elon Musk reading aerospace manuals until dawn before founding SpaceX, or Marie Curie processing tons of pitchblende for a fleck of radium. The Stoics would argue our impatience stems from misaligned expectations. We resent the 10-year journey because we idolize the destination. Seneca advised, enjoy present pleasures so that they don't harm future ones. That espresso shot of achievement today might cost you the vintage wine of mastery tomorrow, so let's bring this home. Where does your ambition need more patience? Is it the fitness routine abandoned before muscles adapt? The language app deleted when fluency feels distant? Or perhaps the creative project shelved because validation didn't arrive on schedule? Identify one area where you've been digging up seeds and try this instead. Map the next 3 actions, not outcomes, that align with your goal. If writing a book, commit to daily paragraphs, not bestseller lists. If building a business, focus on 10 genuine customer connections, not viral fame. Because here's the truth the Stoics carved into stone: time isn't your enemy, it's your ally. The oak doesn't resent its decades of growth, it wears them as rings of honor. Your journey, it's no different. Every moment of patience is another layer of strength, another stroke of the chisel. And one day, when the world asks how you achieved the impossible, you'll smile and say, I showed up even when nothing seemed to happen. That's not just patience, that's power. Marcus Aurelius called them the 4 pillars of a life well lived: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Not abstract ideals, but daily practices that shape ambition into something unshakable. Picture a table with one leg missing. It wobbles no matter how strong the other 3. That's what happens when we chase success without balancing these virtues. Let's start with wisdom, not just knowledge, but the clarity to discern what's essential. The Stoics saw it as the compass needle guiding every decision. Modern ambition often mistakes busyness for wisdom, conflating endless hustle with purposeful action. But true wisdom asks harder questions. Is this goal worth my limited time? Am I climbing the right ladder? It's the executive pausing a lucrative but soul-crushing deal because it conflicts with her values. The artist turning down a trendy commission to stay true to his vision. Wisdom doesn't just help you move forward, it ensures you're heading somewhere that matters. Then there's courage, the virtue we romanticize in heroes but undervalue in ourselves. The Stoics didn't equate courage with fearlessness. They defined it as acting despite fear. Think of the entrepreneur pitching an unconventional idea to skeptical investors, or the employee speaking up about unethical practices despite potential backlash. Courage in ambition isn't about grand gestures. It's the quiet defiance of self-doubt when you hit publish on that vulnerable essay, or the resilience to keep going after your 3rd rejection letter. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way, not as a pep talk but as a battle cry." Every time you choose discomfort over complacency, you're not just building a career, you're forging character. Justice to the Stoics wasn't merely courtroom fairness, it was living in right relation to others. In modern ambition, this translates to recognizing that success isn't a solo act. Are you lifting others as you rise? The founder who shares equity with early employees, the mentor who makes introductions without keeping score. These are acts of ambition fueled by justice. Marcus reminded himself daily, what's not good for the hive isn't good for the bee. Even competitive fields thrive when individuals see rivals as collaborators in raising industry standards. Injustice, by contrast, corrodes ambition from within. Ever noticed how cutting corners to get ahead often leads to paranoia, or how betraying trust isolates you from the very networks that could propel you further? Justice isn't morality theater, it's the glue that sustains long-term success. Finally, temperance, the most misunderstood virtue. This isn't about deprivation, it's about mastery. Picture two chefs, one gorges on ingredients until the dish collapses under excess, the other balances flavors with precision. Modern ambition often glorifies extremes, all-nighters, relentless hustle, no days off. But Stoic temperance asks, at what cost? The programmer who codes for 12 hours straight only to burn out misses what the one who works in focused sprints understands. Sustainable effort outperforms erratic intensity. Marcus practiced this as emperor, carving out time for reflection amid endless demands. Temperance is the investor who diversifies rather than gambling everything on one stock, or the leader who listens more than she speaks. It's ambition with guardrails, knowing that even fire, unchecked, consumes its own fuel. So here's the question, which pillar needs reinforcing in your life? Is it wisdom, trusting your judgment over others' noise? Courage, facing a fear you've avoided? Justice, repairing a relationship strained by competition? Or temperance, replacing burnout rhythms with deliberate balance? The Stoics didn't chase perfection in all four at once. They aimed for awareness. A single step toward one virtue often strengthens the others, because ambition without wisdom is directionless, without courage is fragile, without justice is hollow, and without temperance is self-defeating. But when these four converge, that's when ordinary effort becomes extraordinary legacy. Seneca once described solitude as the school of genius, not empty loneliness, but a sacred space where the mind stretches beyond the chatter of the crowd. In his essay on solitude, he paints a striking contrast. The man who flees to mountaintops still carries his anxieties with him, while the true practitioner of solitude finds richness even in a crowded room by retreating into their own thoughts. This isn't about physical isolation, it's about cultivating an inner citadel that no external noise can breach. Picture two people at a party, one glued to their phone, refreshing likes, the other comfortably detached, observing the room with quiet curiosity. Both are surrounded by people, but only one is free from the tyranny of FOMO, the fear of missing out. Modern life treats solitude like a disease to be cured. We fill every quiet moment with podcasts, notifications, and endless scrolling, anything to avoid being alone with our thoughts. But the Stoics saw solitude as a forge for clarity. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, began each day in stillness writing. When you have trouble getting out of bed, remember, your duty is to be a human being, not a puppet pulled by strings. That's the power of solitude. It reminds you who you are beneath the roles you play. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, who credited his breakthroughs to hours spent wandering alone, or Nikola Tesla, whose most revolutionary ideas came during long, solitary walks. These weren't hermits, they were architects of their own minds. FOMO thrives on comparison, the nagging sense that others are living brighter, fuller lives while you're left behind. But Seneca dismantles this illusion. You are afraid of missing out on what? The same conversations, the same gossip, the same empty pleasures. The Stoic alternative. JOMO, the joy of missing out. It's the liberation of realizing that most can't-miss events are distractions in disguise. Imagine declining an obligatory gathering to work on your novel, or simply sit with a cup of tea, recharging. That's not antisocial, it's an act of self-respect. So how do you transform solitude from awkward silence to fertile ground? Start small. Try a monk mode morning. 1 hour without screens, music, or input, just you, a notebook, and your thoughts. Notice the urge to reach for distractions, then gently redirect. Ask Seneca's question, what have I gained by being alone? Maybe it's the idea that's been eluding you, or the realization that a relationship needs mending. Solitude isn't about escaping the world, it's about returning to it with renewed vision. The next time you feel the itch to check your phone in line or fill silence with small talk, pause. That discomfort is the threshold of growth, as Epictetus taught. If you seek truth, hold no opinion you haven't tested in the quiet of your own mind. Your most profound insights, your boldest ambitions, they're waiting in the spaces between the noise. Will you meet them there? Epictetus, born a slave and later one of history's most revered Stoic teachers, faced insults with a disarmingly simple question. Is this person someone whose judgment I respect? If the answer was no, their words carried no more weight than the chatter of birds. But here's the twist: he didn't just dismiss criticism, he mined it for gold. When a stranger spat insults at him in the marketplace, Epictetus calmly replied, "You must know me better than I know myself. Thank you for pointing out my flaws." That's Stoic detachment in action, not indifference but discernment. Imagine applying this to modern workplaces where feedback can feel like a minefield. A manager critiques your presentation style, or a colleague nitpicks your report. The default reaction: defensiveness, resentment, or worse, self-doubt. But Stoicism offers a third path, treating criticism like a tray of hors d'oeuvres. You don't have to consume everything offered, but you can pick out what nourishes you. The key lies in separating the message from the messenger. Was the feedback delivered harshly? That's about their emotional state. Does it reveal a blind spot in your skills? That's actionable data. Take the tech industry's brutal code reviews. Junior developers often receive pages of nitpicky comments on their work. The Stoic approach. First, ask Epictetus' filter question. Is this critic knowledgeable? If yes, their bluntness might be a gift in disguise, like a surgeon removing dead tissue to save the limb. One Silicon Valley engineer shared how she reframed her boss's scathing feedback. Instead of spiraling, she created a criticism ledger, logging each critique and categorizing it as useful, irrelevant, or requires clarification. Within months, her code improved dramatically, not because she took every comment to heart, but because she stopped wasting energy on the noise. But what about outright insults? The coworker who calls your idea stupid in a meeting? Here's where Marcus Aurelius' journaling practice shines. He wrote, "It's ridiculous not to escape from your own vices, which is possible, while trying to escape the vices of others, which is impossible." In other words, you can't control their rudeness, but you can control whether you internalize it. Picture a seasoned chef receiving a complaint that their soup is too salty. They don't dump the entire pot, they adjust the next batch. Similarly, when feedback feels personal, ask, would I value this person's praise? If not, why honor their disdain? The real test comes when criticism strikes a nerve, when it echoes your own hidden insecurities. A writer hears your characters are flat and panics, fearing they lack talent. This is where Stoicism's Premeditatio Malorum, Premeditation of Evils, becomes a shield. By mentally rehearsing worst-case feedback long before it arrives, you inoculate yourself against its emotional sting. J.K. Rowling famously kept rejection letters as motivation, later saying, "Failure stripped away everything inessential." That's the Stoic mindset. Criticism isn't a verdict, it's friction polishing your potential. So here's today's challenge. The next time you receive feedback, whether from a boss, a peer, or even an internet troll, pause, breathe, then conduct the Stoic triage. 1. Source check. Is this person qualified to assess this area? 2. Substance scan. Does this reveal truth or just their mood? 3. Self-audit. If there's truth, what's one small step to improve? Criticism only wounds when you grant it permission. As Epictetus reminded his students, If someone hands you a gift and you refuse it, who does it belong to? The insult, the critique, the snide remark, they're only yours if you accept them. Otherwise, they remain with the giver, heavy in their hands, light in your mind. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, would periodically swap his silk robes for coarse tunics, sleep on a hard floor, and live on nothing but stale bread and water. This wasn't self-punishment, it was a masterclass in voluntary discomfort, a Stoic exercise to dismantle the illusion that happiness depends on luxury. He called it poverty practiced by choice, and its purpose was radical gratitude. By temporarily stripping away comforts, he revealed a truth we often forget. Abundance isn't about having more, it's about needing less. Picture two people standing before a feast, one who's been fasting, savoring each bite with reverence, and another who's already full, pushing food around their plate with disinterest. The meal is identical, but the experience is worlds apart. That's the power of occasional self-denial. It rewires your relationship with what you already possess. Modern life bombards us with endless upgrades, faster phones, trendier clothes, sleeker cars, but the Stoics warn that comfort, unchecked, breeds entitlement. Think of how a hot shower feels after camping in the cold versus taking one every morning on autopilot. The water's the same, but the appreciation isn't. Seneca's experiments, like his week-long poverty simulations, weren't about rejecting wealth. They were about owning it without being owned by it. He wrote, "Set aside certain days to content yourself with the cheapest fare, then you'll understand that peace of mind doesn't require a banquet." So how can we practice this today? Start with a spending fast. 1 week where you buy only essentials, groceries, utilities, medicine. No takeout, no impulse purchases, no subscriptions. Notice the mental friction when you pass your favorite coffee shop or see an ad for something shiny. That discomfort is the point. It's exposing the invisible cords tying your happiness to consumption. Modern research supports this. A study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that participants who practiced voluntary simplicity for just 2 weeks reported heightened life satisfaction, not from deprivation, but from recalibrating their baseline of enough. But money isn't the only luxury worth fasting from. Try a digital Sabbath, 24 hours without screens, or a convenience cleanse where you hand wash dishes instead of using the dishwasher, or walk instead of driving. The goal isn't to romanticize hardship, but to interrupt the autopilot of comfort. As Naval Ravikant observes, the less you need, the richer you feel. Here's the challenge. What's one luxury you'd struggle to give up for a week? Is it your daily latte, your curated streaming playlist, or the thermostat set just so? Pick one and let its absence teach you. Notice the rationalizations that arise. I deserve this. It's just a small thing. And then notice something deeper, the quiet resilience that emerges when you prove you can thrive without it. Because Stoic poverty isn't about lack, it's about liberation. When you voluntarily step into simplicity, you don't shrink your life, you expand your freedom. And that's wealth no market can quantify. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it away. There are brambles in the path, then go around them." That's all you need to know. At first glance, it sounds simplistic, until you recognize the profound art hidden in that advice. The ability to release what cannot be changed and redirect your energy toward what can. Modern ambition often conflates persistence with clinging to outdated plans, to idealized outcomes, even to grievances that no longer serve us. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but a liberation from the tyranny of unmet expectations. Consider the entrepreneur who stakes her self-worth on a startup's valuation, or the artist who ties his creativity to viral fame. When results diverge from fantasies, suffering follows not because the outcome itself is tragic, but because the mind refuses to loosen its grip. Perfectionism is the modern mask of this attachment. We've been conditioned to believe that unless a project meets every imagined criterion, it's unworthy. But nature doesn't deal in absolutes. A tree doesn't refuse to grow because conditions aren't flawless. It bends toward the available light. The Stoics saw this rigidity as a form of resistance to reality. Epictetus, who endured slavery, put it bluntly, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well." This isn't resignation, it's strategic flexibility. Think of a sculptor who discovers a crack in the marble. She could abandon the work or adapt her vision to incorporate the flaw, creating something more original than her initial plan. The digital age amplifies this struggle. Social media feeds us curated highlight reels, convincing us that everyone else is hitting milestones effortlessly while we stumble. But what if, like Marcus Aurelius, we trained ourselves to see what nature demands for a farmer? That might mean accepting drought and shifting to hardier crops. For a writer, it could mean releasing the expectation that her first draft should rival polished masterpieces. The common thread, detaching from rigid fantasies to engage with the raw material of reality. Here's the pivot point. Letting go isn't about lowering standards, it's about elevating adaptability. A jazz musician doesn't cling to a missed note, she weaves it into the next phrase. A project manager whose timeline collapses doesn't wallow, she redistributes resources. The Stoics called this Amor Fati, loving fate, but you might just call it creative problem solving. When the pandemic shuttered theaters, some actors lamented lost roles. Others launched podcasts or learned cinematography. Both groups faced the same disruption, but only one found opportunity in it. So here's your challenge. What unrealistic expectation have you been white-knuckling? Is it the belief that your career should progress linearly without detours? That your relationships should be free of conflict? Or perhaps the idea that you must master a skill before daring to share it, name it. Then ask, how might this very failure be redirecting me towards something more aligned with my strengths? The answer won't erase the sting of disappointment, but it will reveal something far more valuable, your capacity to move forward, unshackled from the weight of how things should be. Because the truth the Stoics uncovered centuries ago still holds. The quickest way to regain power isn't to control outcomes, but to release your grip on them. Epictetus left us a weapon against impulsive reactions, one so simple it's often overlooked, the space between stimulus and response. He called it prosauch, the Stoic art of attention, that split second where you catch the rising heat of anger, the flush of embarrassment, or the itch to retaliate, and instead of surrendering to it, you pause. Not to suppress the emotion, but to interrogate it. Imagine a courtroom where every knee-jerk reaction must present its case before being granted permission to speak. That's the power of the Stoic pause, turning autopilot into intentional action. Picture this, you're mid-presentation when a colleague interrupts with a dismissive comment. Your pulse quickens, muscles tense, ancient wiring screams, fight back. Here's where most people lose their footing, trading long-term credibility for short-term satisfaction. But the Stoic practitioner, they take a literal breath, oxygen flooding the brain, buying critical seconds to ask Epictetus' razor-sharp question. Will this reaction serve my purpose? That's not passive avoidance, it's strategic restraint. History's most effective leaders, from Lincoln absorbing insults during Civil War debates to Mandela practicing calm under apartheid, mastered this very skill. They understood that emotions are data, not directives. Modern neuroscience confirms why this works. The amygdala, our threat detection system, processes stimuli in milliseconds, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, takes a full 6 seconds to engage. That gap is where Stoic training shines. By inserting deliberate pauses during conflicts, you're not just controlling anger, you're rewiring neural pathways to default to clarity under fire. Think of a negotiator de-escalating a hostage situation or a parent refusing to meet a tantrum with equal intensity. Their power lies not in the absence of emotion, but in the conscious choice of response. Apply this today with a 3-step ritual. First, physically set down your phone, step back from the keyboard, or if possible, excuse yourself to walk briefly. Second, label the emotion silently. This is frustration, or this is pride wounded. Naming it shrinks its power. Third, ask the Stoic triage. 1. Is this within my control? 2. What's the cost of reacting now versus later? 3. How would my best self handle this? The answer might still warrant confrontation, but now it's a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Consider how athletes use timeouts not just to rest but to disrupt momentum. A basketball team down by 10 points doesn't keep playing frantically. They huddle, recalibrate, and return with precision. Your mind deserves the same courtesy. The next time a provocation lands a snarky text, an unfair critique, institute your personal timeout. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. In that space, you'll find something extraordinary, the freedom to choose your character rather than let circumstances choose it for you. Because as Epictetus knew, between the spark and the blaze, there's always a moment where the fire can still be steered. Will you seize it? Marcus Aurelius once scribbled in his private journal, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. Not as if it's a mere task, but as if it's the most important thing you could be doing." That's the Stoic art of presence, treating the current moment not as a stepping stone to some imagined future, but as the only real terrain where life unfolds. Imagine 2 versions of yourself, one constantly planning, regretting, or scrolling, while the other is fully immersed in the conversation, the meal, the work at hand. The difference isn't time management, it's attention management. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they weaponized it. When Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it," he wasn't advocating for more hours, he was revealing how presence stretches seconds into significance. Modern life, with its relentless pings and infinite scroll, turns us into time travelers, physically here, mentally elsewhere. We eat while watching shows we don't remember, half listen to loved ones while drafting emails in our heads, and treat downtime as a loading screen for the real events. But the Stoics saw this as a kind of self-betrayal. Epictetus posed a brutal question. While you're kissing your child, are you really there, or is your mind already racing to the next item on your list? That tension between being in life and merely adjacent to it is where Stoic practice intervenes. Presence isn't passive, it's an active defiance against distraction. Consider the irony of our devices. They promise connection but fracture our attention into shards. A study from the University of California found that the average office worker switches tasks every 3 minutes. Each interruption costs 23 minutes to fully refocus. The Stoics anticipated this chaos centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, still carved out mornings to journal and evenings to reflect, not as luxuries but as lifelines. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think, not as morbid fatalism but as a clarion call to stop postponing aliveness." So how do we reclaim the present in a world engineered to steal it? Start with monotasking, the radical act of doing one thing at a time. Eat without screens. Walk without podcasts. Notice how often your mind tries to hijack you into multitasking. as if productivity were measured in tabs open rather than depth of engagement. The Stoics called this prosouch vigilant awareness. It's the chef who notices the exact shade of golden brown on a roasting vegetable, or the parent who catches the subtle shift in their child's tone before words are spoken. Presence isn't mystical, it's sensory. Here's your challenge. Pick one routine act today: making coffee, showering, commuting, and perform it as if it's the first and last time. Feel the water's temperature, smell the grounds, hear the rhythm of your footsteps. When your mind wanders, it will gently guide it back without judgment. This isn't mindfulness for its own sake. It's training for life's high-stakes moments. The athlete who's present sinks the clutch shot. The leader who listens fully navigates crises with clarity. Presence isn't just peace, it's power, because the Stoics knew a secret we've forgotten. The future is a hallucination, the past a story, the only thing that's real. This breath, this keystroke, this chance to show up fully before it slips away. The present isn't where you wait for life, it's where life happens. Will you be there to meet it? Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who became legend for his iron will, didn't just endure hardship, he sought it out. He walked barefoot through Rome's cobblestone streets in winter, wore the same threadbare tunic while others draped themselves in silk, and slept on the hard ground even when plush beds were available. These weren't acts of masochism, they were deliberate drills for the soul. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, Cato inoculated himself against life's inevitable storms. The Stoics called this ascesis, not self-punishment, but self-mastery through strategic deprivation. Imagine a soldier training in weighted gear so the real battle feels light by comparison. That's the power of voluntary discomfort. It doesn't just prepare you for adversity, it transforms your relationship with ease. Modern life has all but erased natural hardship. We've outsourced discomfort with meal delivery apps, climate-controlled homes, and algorithms that feed us endless dopamine hits. But here's the paradox: the more insulated we become, the more fragile we grow. A study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology revealed something startling. People who occasionally practiced small acts of self-denial, like cold showers or fasting, reported higher baseline happiness than those who avoided discomfort altogether. Why? Because deliberately choosing hardship rewires your brain to see challenges as manageable rather than threatening. It's the difference between dreading a power outage and treating it like a camping adventure. The circumstance is the same, but your resilience isn't. So how do we apply Cato's wisdom today? Start with a digital detox, not the performative unplugging that gets documented on social media, but a true reset. For one day, trade your smartphone for a basic flip phone, or better yet, leave it at home entirely. Notice the panic that arises when you can't check notifications, the phantom limb sensation of reaching for a device that isn't there. That discomfort is the point. Just as Cato's bare feet toughened against the cold, your mind will adapt to the silence, revealing how much of your attention has been hijacked by trivial demands. Author Cal Newport calls this digital minimalism, not rejection of technology, but conscious curation of its role in your life. But self-denial isn't limited to screens. Try a comfort fast, sleep without a pillow for a night, take the stairs instead of the elevator all week, or swap your morning latte for black coffee. These aren't tests of endurance, they're reminders that joy isn't dependent on luxury. Seneca, despite his wealth, periodically lived on stale bread and water, writing, "Poverty is a curriculum, study it, and you'll graduate to freedom." Modern parallels abound. Tech CEOs like Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk have praised intermittent fasting not just for health, but for the mental clarity it forces. When you stop conflating comfort with happiness, you discover a startling truth. The less you need, the richer you feel. Here's the challenge. What's one comfort you can deny yourself this week? Maybe it's the snooze button, the thermostat, or the reflex to complain when things don't go your way. Choose something that stings just enough to remind you of your own adaptability. Because the ultimate goal isn't to live ascetically, it's to prove to yourself that you're more than your cravings for convenience. When you voluntarily step into discomfort, you're not shrinking from life's pleasures, you're expanding your capacity to thrive amid its uncertainties. And that's a power no algorithm can replicate. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." It's a line that cuts through our illusion of control like a scalpel. Think of fate not as some predetermined script, but as the current of a river. You can't stop its flow, but you can learn to navigate its twists with skill instead of panic. Consider the modern professional landscape. Industries vanish overnight, algorithms erase careers, and global shifts redirect entire markets. The Stoics didn't see this as chaos, they saw it as the raw material for reinvention. Take the story of a graphic designer whose entire sector automated. She could have clung to outdated software skills, raging against the tide. Instead, she leaned into the disruption, retraining as a user experience strategist, a field that didn't even exist when she started her career. That's the essence of Seneca's wisdom. Willingness isn't passive surrender, it's active collaboration with change. The designer didn't control the technology wave, but she controlled her response, and in doing so, turned obsolescence into opportunity. This mindset shift is especially crucial when fate delivers what feels like a setback. Imagine being passed over for a promotion you'd worked years to earn. The Stoic approach: first, acknowledge the sting. Stoicism isn't emotional suppression. Then ask, what doors might this close so better ones can open? A tech executive who faced this exact scenario later admitted that losing the promotion freed him to accept an offer at a startup where he eventually built his own company. Had he gotten what he originally wanted, he'd have been locked into a narrower path. Adapting to fate's surprises requires a three-step Stoic drill. First, differentiate between events and their narratives. A job loss isn't inherently tragic, it's a neutral fact. The tragedy or opportunity emerges from the story you attach to it. Second, inventory what remains within your influence. You can't reverse a layoff, but you can update your portfolio, reconnect with mentors, or explore adjacent fields. Third, practice negative visualization, not to dwell on worst-case scenarios, but to preemptively disarm their terror. What if your industry collapses? You've already mentally rehearsed pivoting to consulting, teaching, or launching a passion project. The real test comes when fate's detour feels personal. A health crisis, a betrayal, a financial blow. Here's where Stoicism shines brightest. When the Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus was exiled to a barren island, he didn't lament his fate. He started a school, transforming his punishment into a platform. Modern parallels abound: the cancer survivor who becomes an advocate, the bankrupt entrepreneur who writes a best-selling guide on frugality. These aren't fairy tale endings. They're proof that willingness isn't about liking what happens, but about mining it for meaning. So here's your challenge. Identify one unforeseen change you've resisted, a missed opportunity, a forced transition, even a daily inconvenience like a cancelled flight. Now apply Seneca's lens. How might this very interruption be redirecting you? Not as wishful thinking, but as strategic reframing. Because fate doesn't ask permission to reshape our lives, but it does reward those who meet its terms with curiosity over contempt. Epictetus once challenged his students with a question that still echoes across centuries. What frightens you? Is it death, illness, poverty, or is it the fear of these things itself? That razor-sharp distinction cuts to the heart of Stoic courage, not the absence of fear, but the conscious decision to act despite it. consider Thrasea, the Roman senator who stood alone against Emperor Nero's tyranny. When ordered to endorse executions, he didn't rage or cower, he simply stopped attending Senate meetings. His quiet defiance wasn't recklessness, it was courage refined through daily practice. Thrasea knew what every Stoic masters eventually. Bravery isn't reserved for battlefields. It's the small, stubborn choice to honor your principles when the easier path beckons. Modern life tests courage in subtler but no less vital ways. It's the employee whistleblowing corruption despite career risks, the artist sharing vulnerable work before it feels perfect, or the parent teaching a child to embrace discomfort rather than avoid it. These aren't grand gestures, they're the granular moments where Stoic courage becomes muscle memory. Epictetus trained for such tests by visualizing worst-case scenarios. If you want to be courageous, rehearse in your mind what you'll do if they threaten your life, imprison you, or exile you. For us, that might mean mentally preparing to lose a client before demanding fair pay, or imagining public failure before launching a creative project. The Stoics divided courage into 3 layers. First, physical courage facing bodily harm for a greater good, like firefighters rushing into flames. Second, moral courage standing for truth when it's unpopular, like journalists exposing injustice despite backlash. But the most overlooked is existential courage, the willingness to confront life's fundamental uncertainties, the fragility of relationships, the inevitability of aging, the unpredictability of success. This third form is where modern ambition often stumbles. We'll brave a crowded gym but avoid hard conversations about our career direction. We'll skydive for thrills but panic at the thought of financial instability. Here's where Thrasea's example illuminates. His defiance wasn't impulsive. It sprang from years of Premeditatio Malorum, regularly contemplating exile, death, and disgrace until they lost their power to paralyze. Modern psychology confirms this. Exposure therapy works because repeated, controlled encounters with feared stimuli rewire the brain's threat response. The Stoics were early practitioners. By voluntarily sitting with discomfort through journaling about mortality, practicing poverty, or engaging with critics, they turned fear from a dictator into an advisor. So let's bring this home. What fear have you been sidestepping? Is it the vulnerability of pitching an unconventional idea, the risk of leaving a stable but unfulfilling job? Or perhaps the discomfort of setting boundaries with someone you love? Identify one avoidance pattern, then apply the Stoic triad. 1. Name the worst-case scenario, e.g., if I ask for a raise, they might say no. 2. Assess its true probability. Has my past work earned respect? 3. Plan your response. If refused, I'll request performance metrics to improve. Courage isn't the absence of doubt, it's the presence of action anyway. Like Thrasea's silent Senate seat or Epictetus' unwavering teachings after exile, your bravery won't always roar. Sometimes it's simply the next right thing done while your hands shake, and that's enough. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned exile into a classroom, had a radical approach to pleasure. He welcomed it, but only in doses small enough to avoid dependency. Imagine savoring a single square of dark chocolate with the same intensity others reserve for an entire bar. That's Stoic moderation, not rejection of life's sweetness, but mastery over its pull. Rufus warned his students, just as you wouldn't let a child play with a knife, don't let your desires play unchecked with your happiness. His lessons on temperance weren't about deprivation, they were about precision. A musician doesn't avoid the high notes, they hit them with controlled intensity. Similarly, moderation isn't the enemy of passion. It's the conductor ensuring no single instrument drowns out the symphony. Modern life has turned excess into a virtue. We binge watch shows until our eyes sting, scroll social media until our thumbs ache, and consume news until anxiety becomes background noise. The Stoics saw this coming. Rufus compared unchecked indulgence to drinking seawater. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. Studies now confirm his insight. The average person checks their phone 58 times daily, with heavy users experiencing dopamine crashes akin to substance withdrawal. But here's the paradox Stoicism reveals. True freedom isn't in limitless options, but in consciously chosen limits. A chef doesn't use every spice in the rack. They select just enough to elevate the dish. Consider how moderation applies to ambition itself. The workaholic grinding 80-hour weeks and the procrastinator avoiding all effort share the same flaw imbalance. Rufus taught that temperance applies equally to action and inaction. Picture two runners, one collapses from exhaustion, the other never leaves the couch. Neither reaches the finish line. Modern research echoes this. The Journal of Applied Psychology found that moderate work intensity, 45-55 hours weekly, yields peak productivity, while both under- and overworking degrade performance. The Stoic ideal: channel the disciplined focus of an archer, draw the bowstring taut but never to the point of snapping. So where do you need more moderation? Start by auditing your extremes. Are you addicted to busyness, wearing exhaustion as a badge of honor, or paralyzed by perfectionism, delaying starts until conditions are just right? Maybe it's emotional extremes, lashing out in anger or suppressing feelings entirely. Rufus had students track their impulses like a scientist observing lab rats. When do I reach for my phone reflexively? What triggers my third drink? Why do I interrupt others mid-conversation? Awareness precedes mastery. Here's the challenge. Pick one area where excess creeps in: social media, caffeine, criticism, even exercise. For 7 days, impose a Stoic constraint. Enjoy it fully, but within strict bounds. If it's scrolling, set a 20-minute timer. If it's coffee, cap it at 2 cups. The goal isn't to eliminate pleasure, but to prove you're its master, not its servant. As Rufus reminded his followers, no one is free who is enslaved to their own appetites. Temperance isn't about living less, it's about savoring more by consuming less. The knife cuts both ways. Seneca once observed that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, a reminder that progress isn't a single leap, but the accumulation of countless steps. Modern culture obsesses over overnight success stories, the viral startup, the meteoric rise to fame, while ignoring the quiet power of incremental growth. The Stoics saw this clearly. Ambition isn't about dramatic breakthroughs. It's about the discipline to celebrate the millimeters of forward motion when no one is applauding. Picture two gardeners planting seeds. One digs up the soil daily, frustrated nothing blooms overnight. The other tends patiently, finding joy in each new leaf. A month later, guess whose garden thrives? Consider the myth of the overnight success. Behind every viral moment lies years of unseen effort. Ed Sheeran playing empty pubs for a decade. J.K. Rowling drafting Harry Potter on napkins between shifts. The Stoics called this synchetathesis, the daily ascent to show up, even when results are invisible. Seneca wrote, "Assess your days not by what you harvest, but by what seeds you plant." That's the essence of small wins. They're not consolation prizes. They're the compound interest of achievement. A writer completing 1 paragraph daily ends the year with a manuscript. A runner logging 2 miles each morning circles the globe's circumference over a lifetime. The neuroscience behind this is revelatory. Each small accomplishment, crossing an item off your to-do list, mastering a new chord on guitar, triggers a dopamine release, reinforcing motivation. Stanford researchers found that employees who tracked micro-wins were 23% more productive than those fixated on distant goals. The ancient Stoics anticipated this. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not of grand victories but of daily lessons. Today I overcame irritation, or I listened more than I spoke. These weren't trivial notes, they were proof of progress in real time. So here's the challenge. What's one small win you've overlooked today? Maybe it's resisting the snooze button, drafting an email you've avoided, or simply pausing before reacting in anger. Write it down, not as a footnote, but as evidence of your trajectory. Because ambition isn't a sprint to some distant finish line. It's the art of finding gold in the gravel of ordinary days. The grand finale you're chasing, it's being built right now, brick by humble brick. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a note to himself that would baffle most modern achievers. Accept whatever happens as if you had chosen it. At first glance, it sounds like surrender until you realize this is the secret to unstoppable ambition. Detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring so deeply that you refuse to let external results dictate your inner peace. Picture two archers. One obsesses over where his arrow lands, trembling with each shot. The other focuses solely on his form, releasing each arrow with steady hands, knowing the wind is beyond his control. Both want to hit the target, but only one enjoys the process. That's the art of Stoic detachment, investing fully while holding outcomes lightly. Modern life bombards us with attachment traps. We tie self-worth to promotions, happiness to relationship milestones, validation to social media metrics. The Stoics called this Premeditatio preliminary passions that hijack reason. Think of the entrepreneur who crumbles when funding falls through, or the student who defines intelligence by test scores. Detachment here isn't indifference, it's recognizing that your value exists independent of results. When Marcus wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, throw it away," he wasn't teaching apathy, he was showing how to conserve energy for what truly matters. Consider the tech founder whose startup fails. Attached to the outcome, she spirals into shame. Practicing detachment, she asks, what did I control? Her effort, her ethics, her adaptability, those remain intact. The market's response, that's data, not judgment. This mirrors modern psychological approaches like ACT therapy, which teaches fusion with thoughts versus diffusion, observing outcomes without being consumed by them. The founder who detaches doesn't quit, she iterates. Here's where it gets practical. Identify one goal where you fused your identity to the result. Maybe a dream job, a number on the scale, or a relationship's trajectory. Now apply Marcus' 3-question filter. 1. Is this outcome entirely within my control? Spoiler, almost none are. 2. What actions align with my values regardless of results? 3. How might failure redirect me to something better? History's most resilient figures mastered this. Thomas Edison reframed 10,000 failed experiments as ways not to make a light bulb. J.K. Rowling saw 12 publisher rejections not as proof of poor writing, but as steps toward the right editor. Detachment turns setbacks into navigation points like a sailor adjusting course, not because the wind is wrong, but because it's inevitable. So breathe into your next ambition deeply, then exhale the weight of its outcome. The target matters, but the archer's calm is what ensures your hand stays steady through every shot. Epictetus offered a razor-sharp reminder of human anatomy. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, not as a biological observation, but as a masterclass in the power of restraint. In an era where every thought becomes a tweet and every grievance fuels a viral rant, Stoic silence isn't just about withholding words. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. Picture 2 colleagues in a heated meeting. One interrupts with rehearsed rebuttals before the other finishes speaking, while the other leans in, absorbs, and responds with surgical precision. The difference isn't intelligence, it's discipline. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but the deliberate space between stimulus and response where wisdom grows. Social media has turned silence into a radical act. Platforms reward knee-jerk reactions, hot takes fired off in seconds, outrage stoked for clicks, personal lives monetized as content. But Seneca warned against this very trap. Speech is the mirror of the soul. A man speaks, and behold, his character is revealed. Every unnecessary word, every impulsive post, is a tiny surrender of your inner peace. Consider the modern phenomenon of poster's remorse, that sinking feeling after venting online when the momentary catharsis gives way to regret, the Stoic alternative. Letting thoughts marinate before releasing them into the world. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his journals, writing, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary, not to censor but to curate?" The practice of silence extends beyond digital restraint. It's the parent counting to 3 before reacting to a child's defiance, giving space for empathy to override irritation. It's the leader who ends a tense negotiation by saying, "Let me think on that," transforming pressure into possibility. Even nature teaches this. Fruit falls silent when ripe, storms pass when their energy is spent. The more you master silence, the more your words carry weight. When the ancient Athenians demanded Zeno's opinion on a divisive political issue, the Stoic founder simply walked away. His silence wasn't indifference, it was integrity, refusing to engage with folly. So where does your ambition need more silence? Is it the group chat where reactions outpace reflection? The family debate where proving your point overshadows understanding theirs? Try this Stoic drill. For one day, tally every time you speak or post without pausing to ask Epictetus 3 filters. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? You'll discover how often speech is camouflage for insecurity, or noise masking fear of stillness. Because here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. Sometimes the loudest statement isn't a shout, but the quiet confidence of someone who chooses their battles wisely. The world will keep shouting. Your power lies in deciding when to echo and when to let the silence speak for you. Seneca wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that cut straight to the heart of human suffering. True wealth is wanting what you already have. At first glance, it sounds simple, almost too simple. But buried in those 7 words is a radical Stoic practice, the discipline of desire. Not the suppression of wants, but their realignment with what nourishes the soul rather than the ego. Picture 2 neighbors, one pacing his mansion's halls, restless for a bigger estate, while the other tends his modest garden with undivided attention. The difference isn't in their bank accounts. It's in their ability to find profundity in the present rather than postponing fulfillment for some elusive more. Materialism isn't just about luxury cars or designer labels, it's the quiet belief that happiness lies on the other side of acquisition. The Stoics saw this as a form of self-imposed exile, always chasing horizons while ignoring the ground beneath our feet. Seneca dramatized this with a piercing question. How can you call a man poor when he possesses himself? True poverty, in Stoic terms, isn't lacking possessions, it's lacking mastery over what you crave. Consider the tech founder who scales her company to $1 billion valuation, only to realize she's traded sleep, health, and relationships for a number in a bank account she rarely touches. Or the artist who abandons his unique style to chase viral trends, draining his work of the very passion that made it resonate. These aren't just modern dilemmas, they're ancient human traps dressed in contemporary clothing. The discipline of desire begins with a ruthless audit. What do I actually value? Not what society rewards, not what social media glorifies, but what leaves you energized rather than depleted. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his journal, writing, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your mind is steeped in comparisons to colleagues' promotions, friends' vacations, strangers' curated highlight reels, your desires will mirror that discontent. But if you train your attention on growth, service, or creation, your wants begin to align with your virtues. Here's where it gets practical. Pick one desire you've been nursing, a promotion, a relationship milestone, even something as mundane as a new gadget. Now interrogate it like a Stoic. 1. If I attain this, what will it truly change? 2. Does pursuing this pull me closer to my best self or distract me from it? 3. What if I channeled this energy towards something within my control? The answers might surprise you. That dream job might require compromising integrity. That perfect partner might become a mirror for your unresolved insecurities. Even positive desires, untethered from virtue, can become Trojan horses for misery. So here's your challenge. What's one craving you can reassess this week? Not to abandon ambition, but to refine its direction. Maybe it's trading the desire for external validation for the satisfaction of mastery. Or swapping fantasies of someday freedom for deliberate choices today. Because the Stoics knew a secret our consumer culture tries to bury. The richest life isn't about having everything you want. It's about wanting everything you already have, while still reaching wisely for more. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings not with frantic emails or scrolling, but with a deliberate ritual, a quiet hour of journaling and reflection before the demands of empire came knocking. This wasn't just a personal quirk, it was a tactical choice. The Stoics understood something modern science now confirms. Routines aren't shackles to freedom, they're the scaffolding of greatness. Picture two versions of your day, one where you're buffeted by every notification and whim, another where you move through focused blocks of work, rest, and growth like a skilled conductor leading an orchestra. The difference isn't time, it's intentional design. Consider the myth of the spontaneous genius. We romanticize artists and entrepreneurs who seemingly create brilliance on a whim, but dig deeper you'll find hidden architectures of habit. Beethoven woke at dawn to compose precisely measured coffee before working until afternoon. Maya Angelou rented sparse hotel rooms to write daily, arriving at 6:30 and leaving at 2. What looks like magic is often meticulous routine in disguise. The Stoics called this discipline not rigid self-denial, but the art of aligning actions with purpose. When Marcus wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he was pointing to the power of daily repetition over grand declarations. So how do you build a routine that fuels ambition instead of crushing it? Start with time blocking, not just scheduling tasks but assigning them emotional weight. Deep work, those 2 to 3 hour stretches of undistracted focus, should sit where your energy peaks. For night owls, that might mean creative work after dinner. For early risers, analytical tasks at dawn. The key is recognizing that willpower is finite. Marcus reserved his mornings for philosophy because he knew decision fatigue would erode his clarity by afternoon. Modern studies validate this. Stanford researchers found 4 hours of deep work is the upper limit before cognitive decline sets in. But here's where most routines fail. They ignore rhythm. The Stoics practiced sympatheia harmony with natural cycles. Even the most disciplined emperor took walks, napped, and broke his day into segments. Your brain isn't a machine, it's an organ that thrives on variation. Try the Pomodoro 2.0 method, 90 minutes of focused work followed by 30 minutes of deliberate renewal, a walk, meditation, or even a power nap. This mirrors the ancient Roman practice of dividing the day into horae hours and tempus restorative breaks. The real test comes when life intervenes. A child gets sick, a flight cancels, a project erupts in chaos. This is where Stoic flexibility shines. Your routine shouldn't be a brittle script, but a resilient framework. Marcus often adjusted his schedule for unexpected Senate meetings or military crises, yet maintained his core practices: journaling, exercise, reflection, even in war camps. The modern equivalent, having anchor habits that hold fast amid turbulence. Maybe it's 10 minutes of journaling with your morning coffee, or a weekly review every Sunday night. These become touchstones when the rest of your plan derails. Now ask yourself, what's one routine tweak that could amplify your focus? It might be banning phones from your first hour awake, or dedicating Tuesday afternoons to strategic thinking. Start small. Habit research shows consistency trumps intensity. Track your energy for 3 days. When are you most alert, most creative, most drained? Build your routine around these natural tides, not against them, because the ultimate goal isn't control, it's liberation. When you stop wasting mental energy on when and how to work, you free up reserves for why you're working. And that's when ordinary days become extraordinary legacies. Hierocles, the Stoic philosopher, drew a series of concentric circles in the sand, one for the self, then family, neighbors, community, and finally all humanity. His radical idea that wisdom lies not in staying within your inner circle, but in consciously drawing others closer. This ancient exercise in empathy wasn't about warm feelings. It was a discipline, a deliberate stretching of concern beyond what felt natural. Picture two colleagues locked in conflict. One sees the other as an obstacle, while the Stoic practitioner asks, what unseen burdens might they carry? That shift from resistance to curiosity doesn't just diffuse tension, it reveals hidden pathways through disagreement. Modern conflicts thrive on collapsed perspectives. Online debates become shouting matches because we mistake understanding for agreement. The Stoics made a crucial distinction. Empathy isn't surrender, it's strategic clarity. When Seneca advised, consider the whole life of the person you're judging, he wasn't asking you to excuse harm, but to recognize that everyone fights battles invisible to the naked eye. Think of the coworker who snaps in a meeting. Your first instinct might be defensiveness, but empathy pauses to wonder, did they sleep 3 hours caring for a sick child? Are they facing a silent financial crisis? This isn't about justifying poor behavior. It's about choosing interpretations that leave room for solutions rather than resentment. Hierarchical circles challenge us to practice cognitive hospitality, inviting foreign viewpoints into our mental space long enough to see their contours. Take political polarization. When we reduce opponents to caricatures, we lose the ability to negotiate or innovate. But when a Stoic-leaning activist sits down with someone across the aisle not to debate but to ask, what experiences shaped your stance? Something remarkable happens. The energy shifts from winning to learning. History's greatest mediators, from Nelson Mandela to Harriet Tubman, excelled not because they ignored differences, but because they understood them with surgical precision. So here's your challenge: whose perspective feels like a locked door to you? A dismissive parent, a rival at work, maybe even an inner critic whispering you're not enough. Try this Stoic drill. Write down 3 possible reasons, however unlikely, that might explain their stance, not to excuse harm, but to expand your arsenal of responses. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, he didn't just condemn, he wrote, when someone wrongs you, ask yourself, what good or harm did they think would come of this? That question alone can turn enemies into teachers. Empathy, in the Stoic sense, isn't about feeling what others feel. It's about recognizing that every person is the hero of their own story, just as you are of yours. And when you pause to consider the chapters you haven't read, you don't just resolve conflicts, you prevent them. The next time someone frustrates you, hear hierarchals whispering, draw them closer. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve the freedom that comes with understanding. Seneca's timeless words, "Life is long if you know how to use it," ring like a bell across centuries, calling us back to what truly matters. This isn't just philosophy, it's a challenge. Every technique we've explored, the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, Amor Fati, isn't a one-time tool but a lifelong practice, like sharpening a blade daily to keep it ready for whatever life brings. Picture a blacksmith's workshop. The forge isn't lit only when a sword breaks. It's kept hot so every strike against the anvil builds resilience. That's how Stoicism works. It's not about reading quotes and feeling inspired. It's about returning to these principles when the alarm clock rings too early, when criticism stings, when plans crumble. Consider the Japanese concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement through small, daily steps. A factory worker doesn't overhaul an entire assembly line in one day. They adjust one gear, then another. Similarly, Stoic techniques are gears in the machinery of your mindset. Some days you'll need the premeditation of evils to face a daunting meeting. Other days it's the view from above that pulls you out of pettiness. The key isn't mastering them all at once, it's knowing which tool fits the moment. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet his journal reveals a man constantly relearning the same lessons: patience, perspective, perseverance. If even an emperor needed daily practice, why wouldn't we? Here's the beautiful paradox: these techniques grow stronger precisely when life tests them. Like a tree that withstands storms because its roots have been stressed by wind, your resilience deepens each time you apply Stoic wisdom under pressure. Think of the last time you faced a setback, maybe a rejected proposal or a personal conflict. Recall how different it could have felt if you'd asked, "What part of this is truly within my control?" That shift from frustration to focus is the essence of Stoicism in action, not as a theoretical idea, but as a lived response. So let's bring this full circle. Forget about mastering Stoicism. Instead, ask yourself, which one technique will I test drive today? Maybe it's pausing to journal tonight, dissecting where you thrived or stumbled. Perhaps it's catching yourself before complaining, turning irritation into curiosity. Or maybe it's simply carrying Seneca's question like a compass: is this how I want to use my precious time? The answer isn't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments when you choose purpose over habit. Because a life well lived isn't about the years ahead. It's about the present moment and the next and the next, each one an opportunity to practice what it means to be unshakable. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a forge where ambition is tempered and insecurities are melted down into strength. Think back to where we started, that moment when doubt whispered you weren't enough and you chose to lean in instead of retreating. That's the heart of Stoic transformation, not erasing fear, but wielding it as fuel. Every technique we've explored, from the dichotomy of control to Amor Fati, isn't about passive reflection. It's about active rebellion against the forces that keep us small. The Roman gladiators knew this truth intimately. They stepped into the arena not because they lacked fear, but because they'd trained their minds to see the sand beneath their feet as the only reality that mattered. That's the power you now hold, the ability to stand firm in your arena, whether it's a boardroom, a creative project, or the quiet battleground of your own thoughts. Consider how far we've come. You've learned to separate what's within your grasp from what isn't, stripping anxiety of its power. You've practiced staring down worst-case scenarios until they lost their fangs. You've even discovered how to love fate not as a surrender, but as a strategic embrace of life's curveballs. these aren't just tools, they're mental armor. Marcus Aurelius wore his during wars and plagues, writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength isn't reserved for emperors. It's in the single parent navigating sleepless nights with stoic patience, the artist shipping work despite imposter syndrome, the student who fails an exam but refuses to let it define them. Now here's your final challenge, one that will bridge philosophy and action. Don't just admire these ideas from a distance, embody them. Pick one technique today, just one, and put it to work. Maybe it's journaling tonight to audit what you truly control, or waking up tomorrow and asking, "What virtue will I practice?" like Marcus did. Perhaps it's finally having that difficult conversation, armed with the stoic pause to respond rather than react. The key isn't perfection, it's progression. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you're not just applying stoicism, you're becoming it. So as we close, remember this: ambition without philosophy is a ship without a rudder. But when you anchor your drive in stoic wisdom, you gain something unshakable: the clarity to pursue greatness without losing yourself in the chase. The world will keep testing you, throwing obstacles in your path. But now you'll see them for what they are, not roadblocks, but the very material you need to build your legacy. If this resonated with you, join our community of modern Stoics, hit subscribe, and let's keep sharpening these tools together. Because the journey doesn't end here, it begins.